Kustoff, a congressman from Tennessee, is here with us tonight, and Congressman Lee Zeldin, who's done a great job in New York. Together, we came together with legislation that will prevent the Biden administration from dividing the eternal and indivisible capital of Israel. It will prevent them from putting a consulate for the Palestinian people in Jerusalem and dividing that nation. In fact, within my first few days of serving in the Senate, I forced a vote on the Senate floor to make certain that the U.S. Embassy in Israel remains in Jerusalem. You'll love this. You know what the vote was? 97-3 with me. Norm, I'm going to get you the name of those three. The bottom line is that the U.S. Embassy will always be in Jerusalem. You know, back in May of 2021, just days after Israel's 11-day conflict with Hamas, my good friend Senator Ted Cruz and I flew over to Israel on what was the first congressional delegation visit since the pandemic had begun. Ted and I decided to get there immediately, to be there to show that we stood shoulder to shoulder with Israel, to let the world know that in the face of that conflict, Israel has strong allies in America. Unfortunately, the media leveled very undue criticism, and really regretfully, a number of prominent leaders of the Democrat Party decided to join that course. That's why it was so important that we were there to show and demonstrate our solidarity. And immediately upon returning from the trip, I authored legislation that directed funding away from Hamas-controlled Gaza and back to refueling and restoring Israel's Iron Dome. I went to Israel then because I know that the U.S. and Israel share an unbreakable bond. And as a man of faith, I believe that the fates and the fortunes of our two nations are inextricably intertwined. Thank you. Yet today, that alliance is being put under massive stress under Joe Biden. Just this week, we were shocked by reports that the Biden administration has decided to launch an FBI investigation against Israel based on its efforts to defend itself against terrorists in its own territory. You know, Israel's already conducted an investigation. A stray bullet, a tragic accident in a war zone. Yet to score political points with the far left, the Biden administration is demanding that Israel change its rules of engagement with terrorists. The Biden administration is launching and weaponizing the FBI yet again, this time against our strongest ally in the Middle East. This is a disgrace on so many levels. I feel certain that Prime Minister Netanyahu will not acquiesce to this. And you know, speaking of Prime Minister Netanyahu, there's one interesting thing that Bibi and I share in common. We both started our careers at the same place, a firm called the Boston Consulting Group. When I was visiting with him last year, we spent a good deal of time talking about the early days at BCG and how that time there really framed our perspectives on economic development, on growth and prosperity. I'm glad to see him back, and Israel back on the path toward prosperity. As a businessman like Bibi, I'm action-oriented. I want to see concrete results. And when I was honored to serve as a 30th U.S. ambassador to Japan, I brought that business perspective to my job and my diplomatic work in Tokyo. I'm proud of my work in that role to elevate the U.S.-Japan alliance to new heights. We repositioned and we upgraded our force posture in the region. we signed a very significant U.S.-Japan trade deal. And on my watch, we made Japan the #1 capital investor in America. Those sorts of opportunities are what I see as a senator now when I look at the U.S.-Israel alliance. So I thought I'd like to lay out the path tonight forward in terms of how we strengthen that U.S.-Israel alliance. First, as I've already mentioned, we need to ensure that the U.S. Embassy remains in Jerusalem. It was a courageous and a very long overdue fulfillment of a promise that we made many, many years ago. We owed that to the Jewish state, and we have delivered. Second, we need to build on the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords provide a new cornerstone for peace and prosperity in the Middle East and beyond. You know, the Abraham Accords broke conventional wisdom. They demonstrated that American leadership really can produce more sustainable paths to peaceful relations in the Middle East. Indeed, in my view, the Abraham Accords are the most transformative thing that has happened in the region in the past 50 years. And they've only just begun to show dividends. We must all make certain the Abraham Accords are preserved and are expanded, especially when the next Republican president takes office in 2024. That cannot come soon enough, my friends. You know, sadly, the Biden administration has failed to build upon the Abraham Accords. They lack the will, they lack the capacity to lead in this regard. We're going to see that change again, I hope very, very soon. Third, we must also counter the Iranian regime. In the last few weeks and months, it's been breathtaking to see protesters there, men, women, and children, who are standing up against the regime in Tehran. We need to show them that we support them. We need to demonstrate that as Americans. We need to make certain that the world hears them. One thing is certain, America cannot give comfort or leeway to the corrupt regime in Tehran. Yet the Biden administration wants to give hundreds of billions of dollars to the world's greatest sponsor of terror. This is a regime that puts death threats on the heads of Republican administration officials, many of them who are my very good friends. It's ludicrous. For now, I hope it's dead. Let's do everything we can to make certain it stays dead. Fourth, we've got to stop the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement in its tracks. In the past several years, we've seen the left weaponize the financial markets to achieve their social aims through what they call ESG investing. What we're seeing is a hijacking of corporate America in a way that would advance policies that are so extreme that they would never pass legislative muster. We've got to wake up to what's happening. My fear is that this so-called boycott, divest, and sanctions movement is also being increasingly advanced under the name of ESG investing. In fact, it was recently uncovered that Morningstar, which is one of the largest investment ratings organizations in the world, was pushing anti-Semitism through its own ESG ratings, effectively steering money away from companies that did business with Israel. We've got to identify and uproot this insidious movement. We've got to stop it in its tracks. And in my role on the Senate Banking Committee, I plan to do just that. Lastly, we must immediately stop our children from being brainwashed with anti-Semitism on college campuses. As a father of 4, I am extremely sensitive, very concerned about the fact that what our children learn at school will shape the future of our nation. If our kids are led to believe noxious and untrue narratives about Israel, we could extraordinarily damage the U.S.-Israel relationship. That's why I was highly supportive of the Trump administration's executive order that targeted anti-Semitism on college campuses. What they did was threaten to withhold federal money from educational institutions that failed to combat discrimination. I supported that policy then. I will continue to support it now. In conclusion, I'll say that when it comes to the U.S.-Israel alliance, and despite the serious external challenges that we face, I have a great deal of optimism. This optimism comes from Israel's unique ability to always beat the odds and upset the conventional wisdom. Remember when the pundit said that if you move the embassy to Jerusalem, there will be chaos and destruction? Well, that didn't happen. Instead, as a result of that decision, in my view, our demonstration of resolve in a strong U.S.-Israel relationship actually paved the path for peace. Do you remember when the pundits said that it was never going to be possible to make peace with Arab nations without dealing with the Palestinian issue? Well, that didn't prove true either. Exhibit A, the Abraham Accords. And now we're seeing a similar narrative coming from the liberal media as they attack Israel's new government. Well, I'm optimistic that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will bring continued strength to our nation's relationship despite the Biden administration's best efforts to create daylight between us. And you can rest assured that I intend to work with him to do so. The truth is that the United States and Israel share a very special bond. It's a sacred bond, and I believe in that bond. I want to strengthen that bond. And I look forward to working with all of you in this room to make certain that we accomplish that. Thank you. God bless you. And Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Thank you.
What exactly defines leadership? What propels it? What encourages it? And how do we actually grasp it?
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Hogan. And I just want to start off, why don't you tell us why you want to be governor?
I don't see Larry Hogan winning this at all.
No chance he takes this.
A real estate broker versus the state's lieutenant governor.
Brown with a 14-point lead.
Perhaps it's defined by that never-give-up mentality.
We didn't think this would
Larry
happen.
Hogan is the Rudy of Maryland politics.
Maybe it's by shocking the world and beating the odds.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have sent a loud and clear message to Annapolis that they heard all across the country.
Or beating even tougher odds.
I am so incredibly thankful to so many people who have stood by me in this fight.
Or perhaps being only one of two in 242 years to do it all over again.
They said it was impossible. They said it couldn't be done in Maryland. But thanks to all of you, we just went out and did it. Tonight they voted to keep changing Maryland for the better. And they showed us that what unites us as Marylanders and as Americans is always greater than that which divides us. Thank you for giving me this incredible opportunity to continue to serve.
Please welcome Governor Larry Hogan.
Thank you very, very much. Wow, what an incredible crowd. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom. It's first of all, I just want to start by thanking Senator Coleman and Matt Brooks and the entire RJC for this opportunity and for all that you do for the Republican Party and for our nation. Thank you so much, all of you, for everything that you do. It's great to be here with all of you, and it's truly an honor to be sharing the stage tonight with Senator Hagerty, Secretary Pompeo, and my friend, Vice President Pence. I had the pleasure of getting to know Mike when we served together on the executive committee of the RGA, and then we got the chance to work very closely together throughout the entire COVID crisis as I was chairing the National Governors Association. I can tell you he's one of the most honorable men that I've ever known, and I want to sincerely thank Mike Pence for his incredible service to the nation. I just flew in from attending the RGA in Florida, and I'm happy to report that every single one of our incumbent Republican governors was reelected. And we picked up a Democratic seat by flipping a seat right here in Nevada. Joe Lombardo, Sheriff Joe is now Governor Joe. Now that's the good news, but with the complete failures of the Democrats in Washington, 2022 should have been a huge red wave. Instead, it was barely a ripple. The voters did reward common sense conservatives who focused on the issues that Americans cared about, like the economy and crime and education. But frankly, swing voters took a look at some of our less than stellar nominees and decided that it was just not what they were looking for. So we lost seats that we should have won. Common sense conservatives can and do win anywhere. We've already proven that. In 2014, I was just a small businessman who had never held elective office before, but I was completely fed up with the far left direction of my state. They were calling us the California of the East, and they did not mean that as a compliment. But not a soul believed that it was remotely possible for a Republican to win in the bluest state in America. But we pulled off the biggest surprise upset in America in 2014. And then we did something that rarely ever seems to happen in politics. We actually did exactly what we said we were going to do. We changed the entire mission of state government to be unabashedly pro-jobs and pro-business. We eliminated thousands of job-killing regulations. I'm the only Republican governor in America who got an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature to cut taxes, and we did it 8 years in a row by $4.7 billion, including the largest tax cuts in history this year, in the middle of an election. And we turned a $5.1 billion deficit into the largest surplus in state history, and we took our state's overall economic performance from 49th out of 50 states to number 6. That's the biggest economic turnaround in America. And we strengthened our already strong relationship with Israel by prohibiting our state government from entering into any contracts with any business unless that business certifies that they will not engage in a boycott of Israel. And Maryland has stood steadfast in solidarity with Israel and against anti-Semitism and the BDS movement. When the Democrats pandered to the far-left lunacy of defund the police, I was the first elected leader in America to speak out strongly against it. The reality is that our police are underfunded and under attack. And to reverse the rising tide of violent crime, we need to stop demonizing and sabotaging the dedicated men and women who risk their lives every single day to protect the rest of us. Which is why I enacted a Refund the Police initiative, which invested $500 million more into state and local police. In 2015, I had only been governor for 89 days when the worst violence in 47 years broke out in our largest city of Baltimore. The mayor said that she wanted to give the rioters room to destroy. And President Obama called me as I was on my way into the burning city and cautioned me not to inflame the situation. But I said, Mr. President, I appreciate the call, and the advice, but I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep the people of Baltimore safe. So I immediately declared a state of emergency, and I sent 4,000 members of the Maryland National Guard and 1,000 additional police officers into the city. We followed the Reagan doctrine of peace through strength, and we allowed for peaceful protests, but we immediately stopped all the violence. And then I walked the streets of Baltimore for a week, meeting with faith leaders and community leaders and the NAACP to try to lower the temperature. In the summer of 2020, when cities all across America were facing unrest, Baltimore was peaceful, and city residents worked with us to keep Baltimore safe. In 2018, while Republicans were getting wiped out all across the country, in our deep blue state, in a big blue year, I became only the second Republican governor to be reelected in the entire 242-year history of our state. And we did just as well with Republicans and conservatives as Donald Trump did, but I ran 45 points ahead of him because we also won suburban women, Asians, Hispanics, young voters, and more than 30% of the black vote running against the national president of the NAACP. We completely debunked the myth that the way you vote is predetermined by the color of your skin, where you live, where you were born, or where you worship. We succeeded by growing the tent and by convincing voters that we had the right ideas and the competence to actually get things done. Now, the stakes of this next election could not possibly be any higher. And Joe Biden has a historically unpopular and failed record as a president. Over 70% of the people in America believe that our country is headed in the wrong direction. And Joe Biden said he would govern from the center and unite the country, but instead, he caters to the far-left extremes of his party and flails from crisis to crisis, showing weakness to the world. America is beset by out-of-control inflation, and energy crisis is hurting struggling families and small businesses, and violent crime is devastating our cities and communities. Around the world, America's enemies are emboldened and on the march, and after the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, our allies question whether they should still trust us, and our enemies question whether they should still fear us. And while the American people suffer, the far left continues to further divide us. They demonize the brave men and women of law enforcement. They attack the entrepreneurs and the businesses who create all the jobs. They look down upon the men and women who work hard every single day to keep our economy running. And they talk about America and Israel as forces of oppression instead of the greatest forces for freedom that the world has ever known. Now, last week, Joe Biden said he's not going to change any of his policies over the next 2 years. He's apparently learned nothing from last week's election. But our party cannot afford to make that same mistake. Look, I've always been a guy who tells it like it is. So let me just give it to you straight tonight. A party that has lost the popular vote in 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections, and that couldn't even beat Joe Biden, is desperately in need of a course correction. Now, we should give President Trump all the credit he deserves for his accomplishments in office. He cut taxes. He unleashed the power of domestic energy production, nominated incredible justices to the Supreme Court, and his policies for Israel were the strongest we've ever had. But as I said when I was speaking back in May at the Reagan Library, Trump was saying that we'd be winning so much we'd get tired of winning. Well, I'm sick and tired of our party losing. And after this election last week, I'm even more sick and tired than I was before. Look, this is the third election in a row that we lost and should have won. I say 3 strikes and you're out. If you repeatedly lose to a really bad team, it's time for new leadership. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now look, we have a lot of talented leaders and voices in the Republican Party, and many of them are here at RJC this weekend. Well, last week, the voters sent a clear message that they want to turn the page. I think it's time for the GOP to move forward, not to keep looking backward. To grow the tent, not shrink it. Successful politics is about addition and multiplication, not subtraction and division. And we've been doing far too much subtracting and dividing. We need to stand up for the exhausted majority of Americans who are completely fed up and ready for a change. We need a hopeful, positive vision for America that appeals to more voters. We need to convince swing voters that we have the best ideas and solutions. Excuses, lies, and toxic politics will not win elections or restore America. Only real leadership will do that. Now look, I don't come from the performative arts school of politics. I come from the get to work and get things done school of politics. And I think America needs some workhorses and not more show ponies. I think it's time for less talk and more action. And it's time for the Republican Party to get back to winning again. Now, over the last 8 years, just down the road from our nation's capital, we have already shown a better path forward. And if we can do that in Maryland, then there's no place in America where those very same principles will not succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, despite our imperfections and all of the serious challenges we face, America remains the greatest nation on earth. People from all across the world still yearn to come here, to become Americans. The rest of the world still looks to us for leadership and inspiration. I mean, just ask yourself, even on our darkest days, where on earth would you rather live than the United States of America? Americans are not tired of freedom and democracy. They're tired of failed leadership. They haven't given up on the values that make our nation great. They're just fed up with politicians who put their self-interest before America. Well, I can tell you this, I am not about to give up on the Republican Party or on America. None of us can. I still believe that America's best days are ahead of us and that there is a better path forward if only we have the courage to seize it. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Well, good evening. Nothing like a little Springsteen to get everything going. It is wonderful to be here with so many friends. Thank you, Matt, and the RJC team for letting me be here. Senator Coleman, thank you, too, for including me. Mr. Vice President, I think Vice President's sitting here. It's good to see you. It's great to be your warm-up act tonight. Who knows? The next time we're together, we could be on a stage, multiple podiums. Who knows who else might be with us? Yeah, who knows? And who knows who will between us, and who knows what nicknames we might have. It's it is great fun to be with so many friends and to break bread with my Jewish friends. Although I do not eat as much bread as I used to, thank God. Yeah. And I always learn something new. I was talking to someone earlier tonight. They reminded me that we were asking about Hanukkah and Christmas, and they said, don't forget the Chinese food on Christmas. So I love it. It reminded me, too, tonight when I was a pretty junior member of Congress. I was in Jerusalem. I was invited to a Shabbat dinner by a senior former IDF general. He had 4 generations of his family there. My wife was with me. It reminded me, too, that we draw common cause and shared values, even though we are of different faiths. And we have a lot more friends around us. Indeed, that night I felt like his family. Tonight I feel like we are family. He had spent his whole life defending his nation. Think about these 2 experiments, 2 mighty bands of brothers, 2 audacious nations with an experiment founded in the belief that driven by conscience and conviction, freedom-loving people can rise and make their own nations and their own peoples, and indeed our whole world, better. So the good news is I'm the former Secretary of State, so you get Mike Pompeo unplugged. And let's have that family conversation amongst friends. Let's talk about how we build on the things that matter to families all across our country. We did remarkable work for 4 years. I'm incredibly proud of that. But it's going to take real seriousness, real resolve, people of character to build on that. It's going to take a long time to reverse the things that are happening to our nation today. In fact, it may well take 8 years to fix it. We should be determined to commit the time required to achieve that. The enemies of democracy train their crosshairs on America. They are coming after our ideals, the centrality of our nation. We can all feel it. We can feel higher prices at home. We can feel that our kids aren't as safe when they walk in the neighborhood. We can see what's happening at the southern border. It is indeed, as President Reagan spoke of, it is indeed a time for choosing for America. We can choose to believe in the values that birthed the American family, or we could retreat from those foundations. I served as Secretary of State, and I can tell you firsthand, the stability and security of the world are depending on America to be strong at home, courageous abroad, and to build a deep and abiding relationship with the nation of Israel. This all begins with a core belief in America. We must have that. We have to be strong, united in purpose. We need leaders who will show the way that conservatives get elected in America. Leaders who will fight for them, not for ourselves or our own egos, but for them. When we provide a clear and confident path, good things happen in America. I talked about families. Strong families are guided by a shared purpose and a common cause. They put aside self-promotion and petty differences in the name of doing good for the whole. I am confident that we can do this. This is true whether we're talking about our own family, our communities, our nation, or even the family of nations. I remember one day when President Trump called me, he asked me if I'd read the Washington Post that morning, because the headline had been Mike Pompeo, President Trump's most loyal cabinet member. And I remember saying to him, "Sir, I stopped reading the Washington Post. My cardiologist made me." And then I said, "Mr. President, you should know they didn't intend that as a compliment." And so he laughed and said, "You know, you're right," and he hung up. This loyalty, this work that we must do together is not to a person. This loyalty that I executed alongside Vice President Pence for 4 years was to our nation. It was to a common cause. I was loyal. I worked hard. I did every day everything that I could to honor and be loyal to the oath that I took when I raised my right hand to defend the country. It wasn't a loyalty to a person or a party or a faction. It was to you and the promises that we had made to the United States of America. As I think about it, we're all focused on last Tuesday. I'm proud of how well we did. I certainly wish we had done better, but it seems obvious to me. I ran for office 4 times for Congress in South Central Kansas. The choices are really obvious. We have to find people who are putting themselves forward, who have character, commitment, and real competence. This will be the call of America. They need a vision for what has grounded our nation for decades. Personality and celebrity just aren't going to get it done. We can see that. The American people, you can see the data. The American people did not want to look backward. They wanted to look forward. They care about what happens tomorrow, not what happened yesterday. They're looking for people who have demonstrable claim to have the level of excellence to deliver good things for themselves, their communities, and their families. We want them to do the right thing because it is good, not because it might help them get elected. We want them to do the right thing not because it makes them happy and people will applaud for them. Our party and our country need these strong leaders now more than ever. I spent 4 years in the administration, first serving as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. By the way, a great gig. No media. Think about it. But as you think about that world, we can see that the line between things that happen abroad and things that happen here is very blurred. The idea that there is some notion of a secure America without a strong and prosperous nation at home, or a strong and prosperous nation here at home without an America prepared to defend its core values and protect itself from our adversaries, seems nonsensical. We could see that what happened in Syria with ISIS, or what happened in Beijing with China, or what happens in Tehran, this mattered to people all across the country. People and families are impacted from Oregon to Arizona, from New York to Nevada. If we don't get it right abroad, then our nation will be weaker. And if we don't do the things that we know are right here at home, the capacity for the 72nd or 73rd or 74th Secretary of State will be tremendously diminished. We can see that everything was in place for a conservative wave. I've seen candidates that blame others. They point the finger. I ran 4 times. We are each responsible for our own destiny, along with our maker. And so my admonishment to all is that what is really required as we present the conservative case, as we make the argument, which is what matters, we make the argument and win the argument, and we do so with joy and a smile, that we work our tails off. That we don't simply rail against the machine, that we don't simply go on Fox News or send tweets. We actually do the hard work of making the winning argument about why the conservative ideas deliver good outcomes for every single American. I was reminded by my son the other day that when I first ran for Congress, I entered the race in 2009. There were 7 people on the ballot. My name ID was 2% in the first poll that we took. And I told the pollster, that's all my family. And I know them. I'm only getting half of those votes. We have much work to do. It is simply not enough to own the libs. It is simply not enough to complain. One has to go make the case. I think we had too many folks who weren't out there actively presenting solutions that the American people can count on. I saw this in my time as Secretary of State. We had to make the argument around the world. When the president made the remarkable decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem, the rightful homeland of the Israeli people, we knew that this was important because it was real, it was right, it was decent. And we also knew that it was good for the United States. It was the foundation of what became the Abraham Accords. When I think about the Abraham Accords, We often think about the remarkable leaders that put it in place. That is certainly true, but I think about the outcomes that we could not have dreamed of. 6 years ago, if I'd have stood here and told you that when a United Arab Emirates jet scrambles into the air, that today it is scrambling not to attack Israel, but to fly in formation with Israeli pilots. That's remarkable. As we stand here today, there are aircraft traveling from Tel Aviv to Doha. That's remarkable. And I think about what it means for us here in the United States. By creating more prosperity and more stability in that region, recognizing that negotiating with the terrorists was a fool's errand, by getting that right, we reduce the risk that our young men and women in service might ever have to go and fight and risk their lives in that place. It is unambiguously good domestically for the American people that the Abraham Accords continue to thrive and build, and this momentum is never lost. I get asked from time to time, would Ukraine have been invaded if we were still there? And I can't answer that question because we didn't get 4 more years. But I can tell you this, it didn't happen on our watch. And I think about the model. It was a model that was a realist model. We understood the world as it is, and we deterred the bad guys. We were credible. It wasn't about words, it was about actions that we demonstrated we were prepared to take. I remember so well, we were beginning to lose containment, deterrence against the Islamic Republic of Iran. They'd fired and shot down 2 American UAVs. They'd launched cruise missiles in September of 18 into Abqaiq, Saudi Arabia. September of 19. We knew we had to get back that deterrence. We had to convince the bad guys that we were serious, and we did. We took a strike on General Soleimani that changed the world and created peace. Family. We protected American families with a strike because not only did Iran change its behavior from that point forward, but so did Xi Jinping in China. So did Chairman Kim in South Korea. The Taliban understood what we were doing too, and so did Vladimir Putin. He knew that we were serious about protecting America. When we said we were friends and partners with the nation of Israel, that we were prepared to defend the Zionist project, we were serious and we worked to deliver real outcomes that mattered, not yesterday, but tomorrow. I worry about American institutions, the family amongst them. These institutions, our churches, our synagogues, are under attack. Post-COVID, attendance in these places remains down. These institutions are central to the well-being of our nation. The capacity of each of us to practice our own faith here and to protect religious freedom abroad matters to each of us. This administration has chosen a very different path, and I regret it, and it will take true, serious leadership, not tweets, to fix what ails those institutions. I think of the military that I served in now, goodness, too long ago, back when I could actually fit in an M1 tank. I watch a military that has lost the focus on its mission. It's now training officers and soldiers and non-commissioned officers on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's now talking about every military vehicle being carbon neutral by 2030. These are not the things of serious military leaders, and they are not the things of a serious military. This matters. Our adversaries are watching. I can assure you that the Chinese army right now is not conducting diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And it's worth noting for those of us who are conservative, this is an idea that is central to our nation. Sign me up for diversity. My first tank gunner was an immigrant who had come to the United States of America from Syria. But I didn't choose him because he was a diversity candidate. I chose him because he was a really good tank gunner and I wanted to live. I wanted excellence. I wanted excellence and hard work and merit. All the same things that are central to delivering for conservatives all across America as we put candidates forward in school board races and county commission races and city council races all across our country. I see it just like you do. I can see that we live in an age driven by celebrity. I saw a survey the other day that said 30% of our children would rather produce a YouTube video than spend time with their teacher or practice music or become an astronaut. The family, our core institutions, need to remind young people that there are things that are bigger than themselves. And if they will spend more time thinking about our founding documents, our Declaration of Independence, if they'll spend more time reading the Bible than the 1619 Project, then good things will happen for the United States of America. Each of us serves a higher purpose. I remember so well the first time I went to meet Chairman Kim. I had trained, I had practiced, I was ready. But I was heading there at the moment that we had just had an American returned, a fellow named Otto Warmbier, who died as a result of the harm inflicted of him inside North Korean prison. We still had 3 Americans held there. But the good work that the team did, the hard work, the seriousness with which we approached it, gave us this brilliant opportunity. And on my second visit, I was able to return home with my aircraft, holding 3 more Americans than when we arrived in North Korea. That second meeting also marked a turning point in my life. I passed Dennis Rodman as the American record holder for the time with Chairman Kim. I told my son I would break NBA records, and there you go. We can laugh too. We can bring joy. We can pursue our movement and our conservative ideas from the spirit with which our Creator understood human dignity. This is serious business, but we need not be angry. We need not be mean. We need not call names. We need to make the case and win the argument. And when we do, I am confident. I am deeply confident that not only will the relationship with the United States and Israel continue to flourish, but this great nation will get another 250 remarkable years. Thank you. God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America. Thanks, everybody.
We stand with Israel today for the same reasons the American people have always stood with Israel. We stand with Israel because her cause is our cause. Her values are our values. Her fight is our fight. We stand with Israel because we believe in right over wrong, in good over evil, in liberty over tyranny.
Vice President Mike Pence was in Jerusalem today.
The Vice President said that the embassy was going to be moving to Jerusalem.
Jerusalem is Israel's capital. In the weeks ahead, our administration will open the United States Embassy in Jerusalem.
Vice President Mike Pence praised the relationship between the 2 countries and today made visits to show that respect.
This is our 4th trip to the Holy Land. Karen and I will take a moment to pay our respects at Yad Vashem. We will marvel at the faith and resilience of your people.
Vice President Mike Pence has been celebrated by Israelis.
Mr. Vice President, my good friend Mike, no American vice president has had a greater commitment to Israel and its people.
It is deeply humbling for
Author of the new book, So Help Me God, the 48th Vice President of the United States.
It is great to be here with so many friends. My friend, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Senator Ted Cruz, Governor Chris Sununu, Governor Larry Hogan, Senator Haggerty, and all of you patriotic Republicans at the Republican Jewish Coalition's National Leadership Meeting. Thank you all. And I want to thank Norm Coleman and Matt Brooks for their extraordinary leadership, impactful leadership of this great organization, and say to all of you in the RJC from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for all you did to ensure Republican victories across this country. And thank you for electing a new Republican majority in the United States House of Representatives and ending the speakership of Nancy Pelosi once and for all. How long we've been waiting to say that. You know, the RJC has led millions of Jewish Americans home to the Republican Party and made an extraordinary difference in our elections, and it's a joy for me to be here. But it's a particular joy to be here today with my so much better half, someone who has served this nation as a Marine Corps mom, as a 30-year elementary school teacher. She is a pilot, an accomplished artist, and if I may say so, the best second lady the United States of America has ever had. Would you welcome my wife, Karen Pence? So thank you all. And thank all the RJC supporters for being here. And most of all, let me say on behalf of my wife and my family, thank you for the privilege of serving as your vice president. It was the greatest honor of my life. You know, with the support of the RJC from early on in that 2016 campaign, we elected an administration that changed history. We rebuilt our military. We secured our border. Our military crushed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader without one American casualty. We revived our economy by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation, and we unleashed American energy and made America energy independent for the first time in 70 years. And with the support of the RJC all across this country, Senator, we rolled our sleeves up and confirmed some 300 conservatives to our federal courts at every level. And Senator Ted Cruz, let me thank you in person for Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Thank you, Senator. You know, and as someone who has long championed a country that I have always called our most cherished ally, let me say what an extraordinary privilege it was to be vice president in the most pro-Israel administration in American history. You know, as Matt Brooks knows, I'm actually not new to the cause of the U.S.-Israel relationship. I was elected to Congress in the year 2000. I don't know if I mentioned that I just wrote a book. And I talk about those early days in Congress. I arrived with strong conservative convictions, but I also brought with me a deep and abiding love for the Jewish state of Israel. It was in those early days in Congress, I just made a point. Every time the U.S.-Israel relationship was being debated on the House floor, I would sprint literally toward the House of Representatives and take a spot in the debate. And I must tell you, it struck some of my Democrat colleagues as a little unexpected. Hear this heartland congressman from a rural Indiana district in giving voice to America's relationship with Israel. In fact, I remember on more than one occasion, some prominent Jewish Democrat members of Congress would come up to me, and Ted, the conversation would always be about the same. They would walk up and say, Congressman Pence, that was a pretty good speech about Israel. And I'd say, oh, well, thank you very much. I'm grateful for that. And they'd say, big Jewish community out there in the cornfields of Indiana. And I'd say, well, actually, we have Jewish constituents that I cherish, but no, not a large community. And they'd say, what was your mother's maiden name? And I'd always look them right in the eye and say, look, songs of Israel were the anthems of my youth. And I'm very typical. And the love for Israel echoes out of every little buckboard church beside every cornfield in America. Let me tell you, from the heartland to the coastlands, America stands with Israel. It's true. And with that support and your support, I couldn't be more proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. Our administration ensured that Israel would always have the resources and the strength to defend herself by herself. And under our administration, American support for Israel's security was greater than any time in the history of the modern state of Israel. From our first day in office, we took steps to take action to strengthen that relationship. We acknowledged Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. We removed the United States from the UN Human Rights Council for its blatant anti-Israel bias. We shut down the PLO office in Washington, D.C. And our administration signed the strongest executive order ever written to fight anti-Semitism. We banned taxpayer dollars from any institution of higher education that traffics in anti-Semitic hate. And on the foreign stage, we were just as strong. We withdrew from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal and made it clear that America will never allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. We vigorously enforced sanctions against Iran's oil regime, and we isolated Iran more than ever before. We confronted their malign behavior across the region. For the courage of our armed forces and the decisiveness of our president, Qasem Soleimani is gone. And of course, as Secretary Pompeo just reminded us, after 4 consecutive administrations in both political parties made the promise and broke it, it was the Trump-Pence administration that kept our word to the American people and our most cherished ally when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the state of Israel. It was deeply humbling for me to be a small part of that. But to be clear, all the credit goes to the man who made the decision to turn a deaf ear to virtually every leader in the world and every diplomatic expert in the United States and kept his word. I had the great privilege of traveling shortly after the announcement to speak at the Knesset in Jerusalem, where I had the privilege of explaining and announcing our decision. It was one of the greatest honors of my life. But after I returned to the hotel, the phone rang. The president was on the line. He said he'd seen my speech on television. And then he asked me about the embassy. And I said, well, Mr. President, what we're hearing from the State Department is it'll take about 10 years to build, and it's going to be a couple of $2 billion to get it done. And knowing more than a little bit about construction, the president said to me, that's not good enough. And I said, well, that's just what they're telling us. He said, no. He says, call David Friedman, tell David to get it done. Tell David to get the embassy built and opened in Jerusalem. So, true story. So Karen and I got in the motorcade, we drove out to the airport, and there was Ambassador David Friedman, a truly great American, standing on the tarmac, shaking my hand, and I walked up to him, and he said, Mr. Vice President, appreciated your speech. It was good to have you here. I said, thank you, David. I said, look, he told me to tell you to get it done. And he said, well, no, we're working with the State Department. We'll work with Congress. We'll get the budget. And I said, David, that's not what he said. He said, get it done. And David got that look in his eye that a New York real estate lawyer can get. And 5 months later, for pennies on the dollar, we opened the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. David got it done. So a president made a decision to keep a promise. And a great champion of Israel, who was our ambassador to our most cherished ally, got it done. It was 2 years later on a trip to Israel, Karen and I made in the early days of 2020. Before the COVID pandemic was known and understood and even struck the United States. We were there to participate in an international gathering, but I had the privilege of visiting that American embassy. And as we walked in the front door, I looked over at the cornerstone of the building. Beautiful Jerusalem stone. The tradition of a cornerstone is that the date of the dedication appears, the name of the President of the United States and the ambassador at the embassy at the time. But you can imagine how moved I was when I looked at that cornerstone and I saw that between the name of President Donald Trump and Ambassador David Friedman was my own. David Friedman put it there. To have my name on the Jerusalem stone at the quarter of the American Embassy in Jerusalem is also one of the greatest honors of my life. It's extraordinary to think of the changes that we made. And as I said, to say that every leader in the world told the president not to move the embassy would be an understatement, rather. I mean, literally. I was there for many of the leader calls. I was there for many of the leaders and experts in foreign policy. They all said that it would cause mayhem in the region, that war would break out, that there would be bloodshed. But then the day came, a sunny day in the fall of 2020, when on the south lawn of the White House, leaders of Israel, Bahrain, and the UAE gathered and signed the first peace agreement in the Middle East in nearly 30 years. And that was the leadership that RJC made possible. And your support and your prayers sustained us every step of the way. I recite those accomplishments not to draw them unto myself, but to make sure you all know that we did that together. But how times have changed at home and abroad. We stand here today, inflation is at a 40-year high. Gasoline prices are through the roof. Our southern border is under siege. Crime is skyrocketing in our cities, and our economy has slipped into a recession. Trillions in debt are piled on our children and our grandchildren. It almost seems that we have an administration that's intent on weakening America at home and abroad. But it's particularly incomprehensible that President Biden has re-entered negotiations for a new and even worse nuclear deal with Iran. So let me make you a promise, of which I'm absolutely certain. If the Biden administration signs a new nuclear deal with the mullahs in Tehran, I promise you, the next American president will be a Republican, and the next American president will tear up that deal on day one. Weakness arouses evil. The disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the return to appeasement with Iran, is sending a message of weakness around the world that has emboldened the enemies of freedom from Eastern Europe to the Asia Pacific. And as we gather here today, American freedom itself is under attack like never before. Not from foreign enemies, but from a radical left operating within this country. Working through big media, big government, even big business. They've locked arms to advance a pernicious woke agenda designed to tell the American people what to think, what values are acceptable. You know, the ruling elites in Washington have never been more out of touch or more intent on imposing their agenda on each and every one of us. But there is a cure. And that cure is Republican leadership and American freedom. And my fellow Republicans, as a new Republican majority gathers on Capitol Hill, the role of oversight will be important. The Senator and I both know it's a critical role of the Congress to hold the administration and its failings accountable. It'll be important to make the argument against the administration's policies in the public debate. But I truly do believe to win the future, we as Republicans and our elected leaders must do more than criticize and complain. We must unite our party around a bold, optimistic agenda that offers a clear choice and lays a lasting foundation for victory in 2024 and beyond. We have to have a freedom agenda. A freedom agenda that's grounded in our highest ideals. We have to provide for the common defense, stand strong against Russian aggression. We have to arm Taiwan, continue to hold China accountable, and we have to end the flat lining of our national defense spending and give our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard the resources they need to defend this nation. To revive our economy, we need to make the Trump-Pence tax cuts permanent, and we need to unleash American energy and allow the American people access to all the God-given resources of our land. We need to support law enforcement. We need to secure our border and end the crisis by continuing to build the wall and restore the Remain in Mexico policy that reduced illegal immigration by 90%. And we need to follow the example of Arizona and advance universal school choice for every American family in every state in the Union. We need to be prepared to stand for liberties enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. And with our administration, having appointed to the Supreme Court the 3 justices that gave us a new beginning for life, we must not rest, we must not relent until we restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law in every state in the land. And finally, we must recognize that we live in a time when members of the Democratic Party routinely demean the American founding. When Democrats have sought for years to rewrite the liberties enshrined in our Constitution. There was even talk of trying to pack the court or change the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to achieve outcomes that they couldn't achieve at the ballot box. My fellow Republicans, I think we need to recognize that our party may well be the last line of defense for the Constitution of the United States. You know, every office holder And every member of our armed forces takes the same oath: to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. They take the obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And they pledge to well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office they're about to enter. And it ends with a prayer: so help me God. The American people must know that our party will be the party that keeps our oath to the Constitution, even when political expediency may suggest that we do otherwise. We must, as Proverbs 15 says, we must be the leaders who keep our oath even when it hurts. For the Republican Party to lead America into a boundless future, we must be the party of the Constitution of the United States of America. So to all the members of the Republican Jewish Coalition, my fellow Americans, in these challenging times, let's have faith. Let's have faith in the ideals of our founders and the boundless capacity of every American in freedom to live the American dream. And let's also draw our inspiration from the story of Israel itself. I mean, think about it. How probable is it that a man named Abraham, a man who ruled no empire, commanded no army, performed no miracles, and delivered no prophecy, how probable is it that he should become one of the most influential people in the history of the human race? The progenitor of your faith and mine. How probable is it that his descendants, a group that comprises just 1/5 of 1% of mankind, would outlive and outshine the world's greatest empires? Assyria has fallen, Rome is no more, the walls of Babylon have been reclaimed by the sands of time, yet the Jewish people remain strong and proud and free. And how likely is it that after 2,000 years of exile, after millennia of being scattered to the four corners of the earth, after centuries of relentless persecution and hardship, and just 4 years after walking through the valley of the shadow of death, that same Jewish people should return to their ancestral homeland, created in a day to become a new, free, powerful, proud, and prosperous Jewish state of Israel. There is only one explanation for the miracle of Israel. It is a testimony of generations of your people that should inspire Americans in this generation as much as it's inspired Americans in every generation. That Israel stands for the principle that the promises of God are true. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill said, as I close, in a speech before the Congress, the relationship between his nation and ours, words that I believe apply to the relationship between America and Israel just as much. Winston Churchill said, "He must indeed have a blind soul who cannot see that some great purpose and design is being worked out here below, of which we have the honor to be faithful servants." And then he admonished of our relationship, as I speak today, of America's alliance with Israel, that in the days to come, the people of the Jewish state of Israel and the United States of America will, in his words, for their own safety, for their good of all, walk together in majesty, in justice, in peace. And I know we will. You know, I don't know what the future holds for my family or yours. but we know who holds the future. And if we will but renew our faith in him and in his eternal promises, I believe the best days for America and our most cherished ally, Israel, are yet to come. And we will walk together in a boundless future of freedom and inspire all mankind. So help us God. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless Israel. And God bless America.
We've had really a glorious evening, and I truly, and I listened to the Vice President. One explanation for the promise, for the miracle of Israel, that the promises of God come true. And as the Vice President said in his book, which I hope you all read, he says, "So help me God." This has been a glorious, glorious evening. It's a testament to two things. One, the talent in the Republican Party. And you heard that today from a Governor, Larry Hogan, from a Senator, Bill Hagerty, from the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. That's a glorious, it can't get a better lineup than that. But my friends, it's also a testament to the RJC and to everybody here that they're here because of you. They're here because of what you have done and what you continue to do. And so I thank you. Elliot, are you going to come up here and close? And so let me, before we go, we began this is on a spiritual note. As the Vice President says in his book, "So help me God," okay, we thank the Almighty for the blessings that we have, this country has, that has brought us to this moment. And let us never, ever forget that. So tonight is a spiritual night. It's the beginning of Shabbat, a special time for Jews. And so I don't want us to forget that. I think that's important. So Elliot will now close us. We have a great schedule for tomorrow. We have Senator Cruz and others will be here. It'll be a great, great day. Enjoy. Thank you all. God bless. Thank you. And Elliot, if you can come up and give us the final close of this spiritual moment.